Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about my poem Out, which was first published in the Best of Auckland anthology last year, but you can also find versions of it on my channel. One is a piece of footage of me reading it live at the launch of the Best of Auckland, and the other is a video I made recently with the words on the screen so you can actually read along with it. So I'm going to be talking about the thought processes and the writing processes, all the processes of the poem in this video, and I'm going to operate on the assumption that you have now seen those videos and are familiar with the content, so I will leave links to them down below, so if you haven't seen them, go check them out and then come back for the blah blah. So, blah blah wise, the inspiration from this poem probably came from several different places, but I think the key inspiration was a video that I saw. I don't know when or where or who it was by. It was, you know, one of those things that just pops up on your feed and you watch it and then it's gone forever. This was a video of a young person coming out to his mother. He hid the camera and then he sat her down at the kitchen table and he started to speak, and his voice cracked out on him and he started shaking and crying, and she had to very gently coax it out of him, and then they hugged. And the title of the video was very positive and all the comments were very positive and supportive, and it was talking about, you know, what a good mum for doing such a great job in that scenario. And yes, but when I watched that video I found myself thinking, if I was the mother, how would I feel? And I thought, everything that I have heard from people who have children is that your children are your entire universe. And I thought, if my living universe had a thing to tell me about themselves, that's just a basic information update, and they were so afraid of my reaction that they were crying and shaking and couldn't physically tell me, I would be devastated. I would feel that I had failed them. I would feel that I had failed to assure them that they would always be loved. I would feel that perhaps I had made a mistake somewhere along the way to make them think that perhaps I would have a problem with them being LGBT plus in any way. So that is where the beginning and ending stanzas of this poem come from, where I say my reaction to being told my son is gay would be to cry. And then I summarise the poem by saying that the first thing I would do is apologise. And I said that because if I had that experience of seeing my child suffer just in trying to tell me that, I would feel that I was responsible and that the very least I owed them was an apology, as well as a lot of assurances that they were still loved. Having written the beginning and the end, I had to figure out what was going to go in the middle. And I started thinking about, well, I've imagined the worst case scenario and decided that I would be upset and needing to apologise, but if that's the experience I don't want, what do I want? And I thought of the ways in which I would prefer to learn that my completely hypothetical son was gay. And that's what the first few stanzas are about. They're just random examples that seemed nice and wholesome to me. I also tried to pick examples which could potentially happen at a range of different ages. In the original version, I think I may even have stated the child's approximate age by suggesting like primary school, high school kind of things to show that it could be at any point in his life. I also, in a very early draft of the poem, had stanzas referring to a bisexual child or a lesbian daughter, but I ended up taking those out and just sticking with the image of a gay son, just because bisexual, lesbian and daughter are really long words, and gay and son are just so snappy. So from just a flow and shape of the poem perspective, they were the easier words to work with. I was a little bit sad that I had to make that call though, because I'm aware of erasure of lesbians and bisexual people, and I was concerned that I didn't want to kind of contribute to that, so I was a little bit bummed out about that decision, but ultimately it came down to what's going to work artistically. I did try to keep some inclusivity in the final section of the poem where I refer to a child and I say who they are or who they love, and I specifically said that to reference that this could be any kind of LGBT plus identity. I didn't want to just say who they love because that doesn't address trans identities or non-binary, etc. In the original draft, I did explore those ideas much more in depth, and I had multiple stanzas in which I tried to address how I would react if my child came out as trans. And again, I was exploring different kind of wholesome ideas at different sort of ages that the child might come to me with that update. And I was thinking about the fact that I had started the poem talking about the first thing I would do. And initially I was thinking, well, the second thing I would do would perhaps depend on the scenario in which my child came out and the age they were and any additional information that came along. So maybe the second thing I would do would be like, you know, if it was, say, a teenager who came out as a trans girl, perhaps I would offer to take her shopping when she was comfortable to do so. Maybe if it was a more mature child who came out, you know, maybe the scenario there would be that they were telling me because actually they were super ready and were planning to go and get surgery, at which point perhaps the thing that I would have to do is immediately step in as the mother and say, okay, well, cool if you want surgery, total support, but no, you won't be going to the dodgy, cheap country. No, 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 no. Find somewhere more respectable and I will help you out financially to make you comfortable and happy in your own body. Like, that's what's going to happen here. And I had all of these ideas and I tried to kind of shove them into the poem. And then I did the sensible thing and got some advice. I gave the poem to a gay friend to do a sensitivity read for me, and his comments actually were all about the couple of stanzas where I had tried to work in some ideas around having a trans child. And his comment was that even though the general idea of each stanza was nice, it still seemed to operate on the assumption that everyone has the same experience. So he suggested that I needed to change them to not be quite so sort of assumption heavy about things like you know, a trans woman automatically wanting surgery. Like, he commented that just because you're trans doesn't mean you have a problem with your physical body. That might just mean that you wish to present the correct gender identity, not necessarily change yourself. And he felt that in trying to communicate a supportiveness of whatever changes a person may need to make to their body to feel comfortable, I had inadvertently implied that that was the normal, everybody has it type experience, and he suggested that I take it out. So initially I thought perhaps I could make his suggested changes, and then I do know a couple of trans people and I was thinking perhaps I could bring it to them, but in the end I actually decided to just take them out altogether because I didn't feel strong enough in what I had said to proceed forward with that. So I did truncate it down to just talking about this hypothetical gay son, and then I used that final paragraph and that line of, you know, who they are or who they love to sort of express inclusivity without directly exploring it, because that exploration was going to be A, very, very long, and B, very difficult to write. So that's how we ended up with that final sort of summarising stanza. Something which gave me a little bit of awkwardness with this poem is that in the first stanza I've said the first thing I will do is cry, and then in the final stanza I've said the first thing I will do is apologise, and so I've said two things as the first thing. And so initially I did have the first thing I will do is this, the second thing I'll do is that, but because the two ideas were at either end of the poem. And I mean, it's not the longest poem ever, but it's still a full page. I felt that they were too far apart for the fact that I was technically repeating a first thing to really matter. I was concerned that if I had first thing, whole poem, second thing, a reader might kind of have forgotten that I said it was the first thing. And my other thought was, well, realistically, in that scenario, crying and apologising might actually be simultaneous. So maybe they are both the first thing. So I did have a bit of a struggle just with kind of the, oh, technically that's not accurate element of saying the first thing and then also the first thing is something else. But I decided to just go with it because it sounded weird to refer to a second thing. No one has ever brought it up as an issue, so I think I got away with it. I'm really glad that I went with a sensitivity reader for this piece because it would have been very, very different if I hadn't. I wouldn't have questioned my depictions of a trans coming out if I hadn't had that input, and so those potentially quite clumsy and assumption rich stanzas probably would have remained if I hadn't had a sensitivity reader, and at which point I really hope the poem wouldn't have been published. I could have persevered with them, but if I had done so, if I hadn't just gone, you know what, I think he's right, I don't really know enough about this, perhaps I'll just not talk about it and throw those out and just stick with the hypothetical gay son. If I had kept the trans stuff, I would have sought out a trans sensitivity reader to have a look at it for me. So that was my, to date, only experience with using a sensitivity reader, and it was super easy, and I really strongly think that my piece was better for the input. So yeah, that was a really positive thing. This is a poem about a very, very common situation that so many people find themselves in, whether they're as the parent or as the child. And I think decorative language would actually have reduced the impact of the poem. I think the description of the various scenarios in which I would like to find out my son is gay needed to be simple because it's also describing something which should be simple. Finding out your child is gay, lesbian, etc., it should be easy. It should just be like, ah, yes, okay, la la. And I think keeping the language that simple and describing simple little scenarios directly worked well. I think if I had tried to describe those same innocent scenarios, like flirting with the boy in the supermarket, or, you know, the boy from the skate park coming over with flowers, I think if I had added, you know, abstract ideas or metaphor into that, I think it would have muddied the water and distracted the reader. The message of this poem, I think, deserves simplicity because it needs to be very clearly understood. It's not something which requires abstraction to understand. So whilst I generally don't go with flowery language in general, this poem is probably one of my most simple that I've ever written because of that desire to speak simply about something which should be simple. I think that's everything that I have to say about Out. It's pretty straightforward, but if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them below and I'll see what I can do about answering them. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!